But in one quiet room, during one stormy night, a single moment between them would expose lies, melt decades of bitterness, and rewrite the meaning of family forever. On a rain-soaked evening in Beverly Hills, a mansion built for power fell silent, except for the steady ticking of a clock and the soft footsteps of a little boy who didn't belong there. A billionaire sat motionless in a leather chair, eyes closed, a fortune left carelessly within reach, and a young boy from a struggling neighborhood stood watching him, unaware that what he did next would freeze the entire room and change the course of his life. No one knew the truth about the man in the chair. The storm had rolled over Beverly Hills like a dark curtain, swallowing the hilltops and muting every warm light the mansions tried to throw back into the world. Rain hammered the tall, arched windows of Douglas Whitford's private library, each drop cracking sharp against the glass like distant gunfire. Inside, the room glowed with a soft amber hush from a single floor lamp, casting long shadows across shelves of leather-bound books and the polished curve of a mahogany desk. In the center of that quiet glow sat Douglas Whitford himself, 78 years old, wrapped in a charcoal sweater, sunk deep into a brown leather wingback chair. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady, his chin resting against his collar. Anyone passing by might have thought the old billionaire had drifted gently into a late afternoon nap. But beneath the heavy eyelids and the still hands, something was awake, something watchful. Just inches from his right hand sat a thick white envelope, not tucked away, not hidden. Deliberately placed near the edge of a side table so the stack of $100 bills inside was visible, fanning outward slightly as if the envelope had been opened and forgotten by a man too wealthy to care. $10,000, carelessly displayed, a lure, a test. Douglas Whitford had spent decades losing faith in people, business partners who smiled while plotting, relatives who visited only to ask for money, former employees who slipped silverware into purses. He believed the world was predictable. Give the poor a chance and they would take anything not bolted to the floor. Today, he was ready to prove himself right again. The double doors of the library creaked open. Marcus Reed entered quietly, shaking droplets of rain from his jacket before closing the doors behind him. Even soaking wet, he carried a calm dignity, broad shoulders, tired eyes, and hands that looked used to long days and harder nights. He wore the uniform of the estate's kitchen staff, though he was only a part-time line cook, filling in wherever he could to keep the bills from swallowing him whole. "Afternoon, Mr. Whitford," Marcus murmured automatically, though he knew the man never responded. The billionaire never greeted the kitchen staff, never acknowledged them, never asked for names. In this house, Marcus was no one, just another shadow drifting through the halls. He glanced at the slumped figure in the wingback chair. Sleeping. Or so it seemed. Behind Marcus, a smaller pair of footsteps lingered. Jaden Reed, 7 years old, stood just inside the doorway, holding his frayed backpack close to his chest. His jeans were damp from the rain, his sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, and his big brown eyes darted nervously around the enormous room. This library alone was bigger than their entire apartment in Crenshaw. Marcus crouched beside his son. "You stay right here, champ," he whispered. "Quiet, okay? You know the rules. If we cause any trouble today, I lose this job." Jaden nodded quickly, lips pressed tight. "I'll be good, Daddy." Marcus gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before hurrying off toward the kitchen. He'd already called 3 neighbors and 2 coworkers this morning, begging for someone, anyone, to watch Jaden during his shift, but the rainstorm had closed streets, and no one could help. Bringing his son was the only choice left. Thunder rolled outside, shaking the window panes. Jaden slid onto a small rug near the corner of the room, tucking his legs under him as he quietly watched the flames flicker in the fireplace. His breath formed tiny nervous clouds each time he exhaled. The library felt like another world. Too elegant, too silent, too big for someone like him. Then he noticed it. The envelope, bright white against the dark wood. Fat with cash, hanging dangerously close to the edge of the table beside the sleeping billionaire. Jaden blinked. He wasn't sure why something about it felt wrong. Maybe the way it tilted. Maybe the way the bills peeked out like they were trying to escape. He glanced toward the door Marcus had disappeared through. Jaden knew better than to wander. But he also knew what falling things could sound like in quiet rooms, and how much trouble noise could bring. He looked back at the billionaire. Douglas Whitford didn't move. Not an inch. Jaden rose slowly to his feet. The rain outside softened for a moment, like the world was holding its breath. The ticking clock grew louder. Jaden took a step, then another, each one careful, each one soft, his shadow stretching long across the floor. The billionaire's breathing stayed steady, almost too steady. Jaden reached the table. He stood on his toes and peeked up at the untouched money. Lightning flashed across the windows, illuminating the boy's small silhouette beside the sleeping giant in the leather chair. Jaden stretched a hand toward the envelope, but not to take. Something else had caught his attention, something about the old man's posture, the way his shoulders were hunched, how his legs were slightly trembling beneath the blanket. Jaden hesitated, then whispered into the quiet, "Why is he so cold?" The boy looked back at the envelope, then at the man's still face. The storm cracked loudly overhead, and in that instant, Jaden made a decision that would change the rest of his life. He glanced once more toward the kitchen door, hoping his father wouldn't return too soon, then back at the old man in the leather chair. The billionaire's legs were stiff, his hands pale, the faintest shiver running through his fingers. Jaden had seen that kind of tremble before. His teacher at school, Ms. Harris, sometimes shivered like that when the classroom heater broke. Cold was cold, no matter how rich the room looked. Jaden swallowed and stepped closer, his sneakers leaving tiny damp prints on the polished floor. The vast library felt even bigger now, the ceiling stretching high above him like the inside of a cathedral. Everywhere he looked, the shelves towered over him, full of books older than anyone he knew. He'd never been in a place like this, a room that smelled like leather and quiet secrets. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that someone looked cold. He hesitated only a second before gently pushing the envelope, still dangling from the table's edge, back toward the center. He used just one finger, careful not to crinkle or disturb the bills inside. He didn't know exactly how much money was there, but he knew it was more than his dad made in months. Touching it felt like touching something forbidden, so he didn't. He just nudged it into safety, away from the danger of falling. Then he turned his eyes toward the billionaire again. A rustle echoed through the room as Jaden slipped his small hoodie off. It was thin, faded blue, the front zipper stuck halfway from years of use. Rainwater still clung to the fabric from when they'd run from the bus stop earlier. The cold air in the room nipped at his arms, raising tiny bumps on his skin. But Jaden didn't hesitate. He stepped up to the chair. The old man's face was so much closer now, lined with age, eyebrows heavy, lips pressed in a faint scowl even in sleep. Jaden wasn't scared of his expression. Kids often saw truth where adults saw danger. And the truth he saw was simple. The man looked lonely, and lonely people always looked colder. Jaden lifted the hoodie carefully, almost reverently, and settled it over the billionaire's legs. The sleeves dangled awkwardly over the sides of the chair, but the soft weight of the fabric eased across the man's knees like a blanket. Jaden smoothed it out with both hands. "You looked cold," he whispered, voice barely more than a breath. For a moment, Everything stopped. Storm, fireplace crackle, ticking clock. The whole house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to shift. Then, a drop of rainwater slid from the soaked hoodie and splashed onto the deep brown Italian leather of the chair. Jaden froze. The water blossomed into a tiny dark stain, spreading slowly, tauntingly, like ink on paper. He sucked in a sharp breath, eyes widening. That chair looked expensive. Everything in this room looked expensive. Too expensive. His heart thudded inside his chest. He reached out, instinctively trying to brush the stain away with his sleeve. But his sleeve was wet too. His hand hovered helplessly in midair. The door behind him opened. Jaden spun around. Marcus stood in the doorway, still holding a dish towel, the color draining from his face the instant he saw his son next to the billionaire. The hoodie, the chair, the stain, the billionaire asleep. "Jaden," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with panic. What are you doing?" Jaden opened his mouth, but no words came out. His father's eyes flicked from the stain to the old man's still form, then back to the envelope sitting on the table. Horror washed across Marcus's face. He rushed forward, gently but urgently pulling Jaden away from the chair. "I told you to stay put," he breathed, chest rising and falling fast. "Baby, you can't. This isn't—" But he didn't get to finish. Because in that moment, Douglas Whitford shifted. It wasn't a small movement. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. The sudden tightening of shoulders, the slow lift of his chin, the creak of leather under weight, as though he were rising from the depths of some ancient slumber. Jaden clutched his father's arm. Marcus went rigid, lips parting in silent dread. The billionaire's eyelids fluttered, then opened, revealing eyes colder than the storm outside. He looked down at the hoodie draped over his legs. Then he looked at the stain. His jaw tensed, and finally, he turned his gaze, sharp, unwavering, toward Marcus and his trembling son. "What," Douglas Whitford growled, "is going on in my house?" Jaden shrank back. Marcus stepped in front of him, instinctive fear tightening his posture. His voice shook. "Sir, I can explain. My boy didn't mean... He wasn't trying to..." Whitford raised a hand sharply, silencing him. His eyes dropped to the dark spot on the chair. He leaned forward, inspecting it like a jeweler examining a flaw in rare stone. He dragged his thumb across it, then looked back at Marcus with slow, disbelieving outrage. "This chair," Whitford said, voice icy, "is imported Italian leather, 10 years old, hand-stitched, and now..." He gestured at the stain. "It's ruined." Marcus's heart plummeted. "Sir, please, I'll clean it, You can't clean water off that kind of leather. It stains permanently." Whitford tapped the chair arm with accusation. "The restoration on this alone will cost $2,000. Jaden gasped. Marcus's breath hitched. $2,000 was more than their monthly rent. Whitford's eyes flicked to the boy. "And you," he said, voice low, dangerous. "What were you doing near me? Near that table?" Jaden stepped forward before Marcus could block him. His small chin lifted, shaking but determined. "I thought you were cold," he said softly. Marcus closed his eyes, devastated. Whitford stared at the child. No one moved. Not even the storm dared interrupt the silence. Then the billionaire leaned back in his chair, fingers steepling slowly. "And what," he murmured, "makes you think I care what you thought?" His voice cracked across the room like lightning. Jaden didn't flinch this time. He looked only at the man's trembling hands, then at the hoodie still resting on his legs. "I was just trying to help," he whispered. Whitford's expression hardened, but his eyes flickered, just for a moment. Something unreadable passed behind them. Marcus pulled Jaden protectively against his side, but the boy kept staring at the billionaire. guilt and innocence swirling inside his small chest. Outside, thunder rumbled again, and the air in the library grew thick, heavy with fear, expectation, and something else neither of them could name yet. Something shifting, something dangerous, something that would soon unravel everything they thought they knew about the man in the chair. The quiet inside the library grew so thick it felt like a second storm brewing within the walls. The fire crackled weakly, as if even the flames were afraid to speak. Marcus stood frozen with Jaden tucked behind him, but his trembling hands betrayed his calm expression. He had been fired before, once because a manager didn't like the way he looked at customers, once because a new hire blamed him for a mistake she made. Jobs vanished quickly when you came from the wrong neighborhood. He couldn't afford to lose another one. Whitford didn't move for several seconds. His gaze stayed fixed on the boy, as if studying a puzzle that refused to solve itself. His fingers tapped the arm of the chair, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, without warning, he turned his attention back to the envelope on the table. "Interesting," he murmured. He leaned forward, inspecting it. The swollen envelope still sat neatly in the center where Jaden had nudged it. Not a bill had been disturbed. "You were near my table." Whitford's voice was level, but it carried an undertone Marcus recognized from men who enjoyed power a little too much. "Yet you didn't touch it." Jaden swallowed hard, but didn't back away. "It was falling," he whispered. "I didn't want it to hit the floor." Whitford's eyebrow twitched, barely visible but sharp as a blade. "You didn't want it to hit the floor," he repeated, tasting the words. Marcus stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, he's just a kid. He wasn't trying to—" Whitford lifted a hand, silencing him again. His attention was fully on Jaden now. Carefully, he shifted in his chair, each movement slow and controlled. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying the boy as if examining a specimen under glass. Jaden didn't drop his gaze. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, its steady rhythm slicing through the taut hush. Tick, tick, tick. "Most children would have reached for that envelope," Whitford said quietly. "It's quite a lot of money for someone your age." "I don't need money," Jaden said, his voice barely above a breath. Marcus closed his eyes. The boy was honest, sometimes too honest. Whitford tilted his head. "And what do you need?" Jaden thought for a moment. "My dad to keep his job." Marcus felt something break loose in his chest. Fear, pride, heartbreak, all tangled together. "A noble answer," Whitford said, but his tone didn't warm. His gaze hardened. "Yet actions matter more than words." He leaned forward, the leather creaking under him. "You touched the table. You moved the envelope, and you clearly disturbed my chair." Marcus stiffened, jaw tightening. "Sir, if you'll just let me—" But Whitford was no longer listening. His stare was fixed entirely on Jaden, as if the boy alone controlled the outcome. "Come closer," he ordered. Marcus instinctively put an arm across Jaden's chest, stopping him. His voice dropped low. "No, sir. If you have something to say, you can say it to me. He's a child." Whitford's eyes flicked to Marcus, cold and assessing. "Move." Marcus's breath caught. He wasn't a man easily intimidated. He'd been through too much for that. But there was something in Whitford's tone that made his spine stiffen. Something that said the man held all the cards, and he knew it. Jaden tugged lightly on Marcus's sleeve. "It's okay, Daddy." "No, Jay." But the boy stepped around his father before he could stop him. The child stood in front of the billionaire, small and brave with wet curls clinging to his forehead and sneakers still leaving faint prints on the rug. He didn't shake this time. He only looked up, waiting. Whitford stared at him for a long moment, as if measuring the boy's soul. "Tell me," Whitford said finally, "why didn't you take the money?" Jaden blinked. "Because it's not mine." Whitford leaned back slightly, unsatisfied. Many people take things that aren't theirs. Happens every day. But that doesn't make it right, Jaden said softly. The fire popped. Outside, the storm rumbled, shaking the glass panes. Whitford's jaw flexed. You could have hidden it. Your father might have needed it. He would have been mad at me, Jaden said. My daddy says taking what isn't yours makes you lose who you are. Marcus felt tears sting behind his eyes, but he held them back. Pride wasn't something he allowed himself often. But hearing Jaden say those words, here, now, in front of a man who could destroy their entire future with a sentence, it lit something warm inside him, something he hadn't felt since before Jaden's mother passed. And, Jaden added, his voice even softer, you didn't look like you needed anything except a blanket. Whitford froze. His fingers, resting on the armrest, twitched. His gaze sharpened, then softened, then darkened, as if 3 different storms moved behind his eyes. It was the first crack in his wall, the first sign he was no longer the man he played, angry, unreachable, immovable. But then, in an instant, his expression hardened again. You touched my chair, he said. You placed your wet hoodie on it. You caused damage. Jaden lowered his head. I'm sorry. Sorry won't fix it. Marcus stepped forward urgently. Sir, please, he's just... But Whitford raised a finger, not to silence Marcus, but to demand something else. Jaden, he said, voice deep, measured. If you claim to be honest, prove it. Jaden lifted his chin. A small tremble ran through his fingers, but his eyes stayed steady. How? He asked. Whitford pointed to the envelope. Show me your hands. Jaden blinked. My hands? Yes, Whitford said. Let me see if they can stay still while I place temptation right in front of you. Marcus inhaled sharply. Jaden swallowed. Whitford reached for the envelope with slow, deliberate precision. His fingers brushed the crisp edge, lifting it so the bills inside spilled open like a fan of green. He held it between them, inches from Jaden's outstretched palms. The test had begun, and this time, the whole room seemed to know it. The clock ticked louder. The storm pressed against the windows. Even the fire dimmed, as though it too leaned closer to watch. Whitford lowered the open envelope until it hovered just above the boy's hands. Let's see, he whispered, what you do next. Jaden didn't move, but his breath hitched, and the entire world seemed to tilt, waiting to see whether innocence could hold steady beneath the weight of wealth. Jaden stared at the open envelope, the bills inside crisp and impossibly bright under the warm lamplight. $10,000. More money than he had ever seen, more money than his father had ever held at once. The scent of leather, old paper, and rain filled the room as the boy's small hands trembled in the space between him and the billionaire. Whitford didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on the boy, searching for the smallest flicker of greed, a twitch, a glance, a reach. For decades he had believed that kindness was just a mask people wore until money appeared, that even the children of good parents carried a stain inside them, waiting for opportunity. Marcus stood behind his son, helpless. His throat was tight, his heart hammering. He could only watch as his child was placed under a spotlight harsher than anything life had thrown at him so far. Jaden's fingers curled inward, not outward. He didn't reach. He didn't touch. Instead, he took one small step back. I don't want it, he whispered, voice quivering. Whitford lowered the envelope another inch, eyes narrowing. Most people who say that are lying. Even adults with stable jobs don't turn down this kind of cash. Jaden shook his head. Daddy says taking what isn't yours makes your heart get smaller. Marcus's breath caught. He hadn't expected those words to return to him like this. Not here. Not now. He felt his hands clench at his sides, fighting the swell of emotion in his chest. Whitford's gaze flicked sharply to Marcus, then back to the boy. "Your father taught you that?" Jaden nodded. "He says, when you take too much, it makes you forget who you are." "And who are you?" Whitford pressed, voice deep. Jaden hesitated, then answered with a soft, uncertain bravery. "I'm someone who wants to help." The billionaire leaned back slowly, studying him. His fingers closed over the envelope as he withdrew it. Not abruptly, not angrily, but thoughtfully, like a scientist folding away a surprising result. Then his eyes drifted downward, to the hoodie lying across his legs. Soaked, thin, cheap. The sleeves were still damp from the rain, and the boy's small hands smoothing it over him earlier. A few stray threads stuck out along the seams, and the faded blue fabric looked heartbreakingly fragile against the rich brown leather of the chair. A droplet of water slid from the cuff, landing directly on the leather cushion. The dark stain spread another inch. Whitford's jaw tightened, but not with anger, not fully. His expression was more complicated now, as if something inside him were shifting, cracking in places long hardened. Yet old habits rose quickly, like reflex. He touched the wet patch with 2 fingers. "This chair," he said slowly, "is worth more than some cars." Marcus stepped forward, panic flaring. "Sir, please, I'll fix it. Don't lie." Whitford's voice sliced through the air. "Water stains, it's ruined." The word ruined echoed in the vast room, hitting Marcus like a blow. Jaden's shoulders curled inward as if the sound itself had pushed him down. For a moment, the storm outside roared, lightning flashing white against the shelves. The windows rattled, the fire hissed, the air felt cold, too cold, even with flames flickering in the hearth. Then, with a slow inhale, Whitford looked directly at Jaden. "You put your coat on me," he said quietly. Jaden nodded. "You looked cold." "And the envelope?" "It was going to fall. And now my chair is damaged. What do you think should happen next?" Jaden's lip quivered. His cheeks flushed. But he didn't hide behind his father. Instead, he reached into the small backpack slung over his shoulder. His fingers fumbled for a second before he pulled out something tiny, cupped in both hands. A toy police car, blue and white, chipped paint, 1 wheel missing. The metal edges were worn smooth from years of holding, playing, keeping it in his pocket for comfort. It was clearly old, clearly loved. He held it out with both hands. "I'm sorry," Jaden whispered. "I don't have $2,000. I don't have anything, except this. It was Mommy's gift, before she went to heaven." Marcus's breath broke. He turned his head away, trying to hide it, but the pain was too raw, too visible. Whitford stared at the toy. His eyes sharpened, not with anger, but with something far deeper. A memory, a longing, a hurt he never allowed anyone to see. "That is your favorite thing," the billionaire said quietly, almost accusingly. Jaden nodded. "But I messed up, so you can have it." Lightning flashed again, illuminating the boy's small face, afraid, but determined, honest in a way that no adult had ever been with Whitford in decades. For the first time, the old man's fingers trembled. He reached out slowly and took the toy car, holding it gently, almost reverently, as though it were something fragile, something priceless. A breath escaped him, sharp, broken. Then he lifted his gaze, eyes shining in the dim light. "You gave up the only thing you had," he murmured, "for a mistake you made while trying to help." Jaden nodded. Whitford's throat moved in a slow swallow. For a long, suspended moment, no one spoke. The house was silent except for the steady beat of the rain and the faint crackle of the fire. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause, as though the entire mansion was listening, waiting for a shift it had not felt in years. Finally, Whitford exhaled. Long, slow, human. The billionaire who trusted no one lowered his defenses. Just a crack. And in that fragile sliver of space, something warm flickered to life. "Sit," he whispered hoarsely to Marcus. "Both of you, sit." But before they could move, he added, voice barely steady, "You didn't ruin anything. In fact, I think you may have fixed something I didn't know was broken." The words hung in the vast library like a fragile thread, shimmering with meaning Marcus couldn't quite grasp. The firelight flickered across Whitford's lined face, softening the stern creases that had been etched there for decades. For the first time since entering the room, Marcus hesitated not from fear, but from disbelief, pure disbelief, that the billionaire's tone had shifted so drastically. But the moment didn't last. Whitford blinked, and the vulnerability vanished as quickly as it came. His eyes sharpened, the old guard slamming back into place. He straightened in his chair. His grip on the toy police car tightened, knuckles turning pale. "Sit," he repeated, more controlled now, though the tremor hadn't entirely left his voice. Marcus, uncertain, guided Jaden to the small sofa across from the chair. The leather was cool beneath them, smelling faintly of cedar and age. Jaden sat close, clutching the straps of his backpack as if it might shield him. The storm outside deepened, rain drumming harder, wind brushing the windows like a warning. The entire house felt on edge, as if watching the fragile exchange with held breath. Whitford leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "You," he said, pointing at Marcus, "didn't answer my question earlier." Marcus stiffened. "Sir? What question? What should happen next?" Marcus swallowed. Every instinct in him pushed to apologize again, to offer to pay, to beg if he had to. He'd done it before at other jobs, swallowing his pride for the sake of survival. But now, with Jaden watching, the weight of shame felt heavier, sharper. "I don't know what to say, sir," he admitted quietly. "I never meant for any of this to happen. My son, he didn't try to cause trouble." Whitford's gaze softened. Not kind, not forgiving, but thoughtful. "And you," he said, turning to Jaden, "why give up your mother's gift for a mistake that could have been ignored?" Jaden's voice shook, but his answer didn't. "Because Daddy says when people are upset, you fix what you can, even if it hurts." Marcus closed his eyes, the words hitting him like a blow. He hadn't realized how closely Jaden had listened to the little lessons he muttered after long days. Lessons he feared weren't enough, weren't shaping him the way a mother might have. Whitford exhaled slowly. His fingers brushed the toy car again, the missing wheel glinting faintly in the warm light. Then, abruptly, he stood. The movement startled them, startled even the house, it seemed, the fire popping loudly as though in response. Whitford reached for the cane leaning beside his chair, gripping it with a practiced familiarity. The top of the cane was silver, sculpted into a lion's head worn smooth from years of use. He took one step, then another, circling the coffee table between them. His footsteps were soft but deliberate on the rug. When he stopped in front of Marcus, the older man's shadow fell long across the sofa. "You think I'm angry about the stain," he said quietly. "You assume I care more about leather than people." Marcus inhaled sharply. That was exactly what he would. Whitford tapped the cane against the side of the chair. The faint thud echoed. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Reed." His voice dropped lower. "This house has more expensive furniture than I can remember. Do you know how much any of it has meant to me?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing," Whitford whispered. "Not a damn thing." He looked around the library, at the shelves, the velvet drapes, the antique lamps, as if seeing them for the first time. or perhaps remembering why they no longer mattered. "I've spent years inside rooms like this," he said, "filled with objects, yet empty of people I trust." He turned to Jaden. "Until today." Jaden blinked. His small hands loosened their grip on his backpack. Whitford lowered himself slowly back into his chair. The fire cast a warm glow across his features, softening the harsh lines of wealth and age. "The stain on this chair," he continued, touching the wet mark, "is the least important thing that's entered this room in months." He looked directly at Marcus. "But your son, his honesty?" A pause, a breath. "That matters." Marcus didn't know what to say. Gratitude, relief, disbelief, they all tangled together, making his hands tremble on his knees. But then Whitford's tone shifted again, colder, sharper. "However," he said, "mistakes still have consequences." Jaden flinched. Marcus's shoulders tensed. "But not the kind you fear." Whitford reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope, still thick with money, still deliberately on display. He tapped it lightly against his palm. "This was a test," he said quietly. "One I've given before, many times. And not one person, adult or child, has ever passed the way your son just did." Jaden looked down at his shoes. Whitford nodded toward him. "Your boy didn't hesitate to protect something that wasn't his. He didn't hesitate to help someone he doesn't know. And he offered up the only thing he had in this world to fix a mistake he made while trying to do good." He lifted the toy car again, holding it between thumb and forefinger. "This," he said softly, "is worth more than any of the things in this room." The fire crackled, warm and gentle this time. Marcus's breath hitched. Jaden's eyes glistened. The billionaire's wall was cracking, visibly now, undeniably. Then Whitford leaned back, the envelope still in hand, his voice firm but changed. "The test isn't over," he said. "Not yet. But the hardest part, the part most people fail, has passed." Jaden swallowed. "Did I do okay?" Whitford looked at him, really looked, and nodded once. "You did better than okay. You reminded me what a decent human being looks like." A long silence followed, soft, fragile, and full of possibility. Then, with a sigh that seemed to release years of bitterness from his chest, Whitford added, "And I'm not finished with you yet." The words settled over the room like a second storm, quiet, thick, unpredictable. Marcus felt the hairs on his arms rise. Jaden, sitting stiffly beside him, hugged his backpack a little tighter. Whitford wasn't yelling anymore, and somehow that frightened Marcus more than the anger. A calm billionaire was a calculating billionaire, and a calculating billionaire could decide someone's future with a single breath. Whitford straightened the blanket, Jaden's soaked hoodie, across his knees and stared at the stain on the leather once more. But his eyes no longer held outrage. They held something else, something Marcus couldn't read. "Let me ask you something, Jaden," Whitford said, lowering his voice to something almost gentle. "Do you know how much this chair costs?" Jaden shook his head slowly. "More than your father makes in 6 months," Whitford replied. "Maybe a year." Marcus's stomach twisted, shame burning through him. He hated being measured that way. In dollars, not dignity. He hated that his son had to hear it. "But," Whitford continued, tapping the darkened patch, "you didn't think about that when you tried to help me, did you?" Jaden's voice barely rose above a whisper. "No, sir. You saw someone cold, and you tried to warm them." Marcus felt a tear form behind his eye, but he blinked it away. He couldn't cry here. Not in this room. Whitford leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, not in suspicion now, but in curiosity. "Tell me the truth, boy. Were you afraid I might get angry when you put your coat on me?" Jaden's breath caught. "Yes, but Daddy says you do good things anyway." even when people don't see it. The billionaire's expression faltered. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing a crack in the icy veneer he'd spent decades maintaining. He looked away, as though the boy's words had struck somewhere tender, somewhere long forgotten. Then he returned his gaze to Marcus. "You raised him well," he said quietly. "Better than most fathers I've met." Marcus nodded once, humbled, but there was still fear coiled inside him, tight as a clenched fist. He knew what came after compliments from rich men: requests, expectations, or disappointment. Whitford shifted again, gripping the cane beside him. "But a mistake was made," he added, the tone cooling like water poured over flame. "And there must be a consequence." Jaden stiffened. Marcus's breath stopped cold. The billionaire reached for the envelope again, weighing it in his hand, his eyes fixed on Marcus. $2,000 to restore the chair. You can't afford that, can you?" Marcus swallowed. "No, sir. Not even close." "And you," he said, turning to Jaden. "What do you have to offer besides that toy?" Jaden's face paled. He looked at his hands, then at the toy car still resting on the table beside Whitford. I don't have anything else." "You're sure?" Whitford pressed, but not unkindly. "Nothing you can give me to make this right?" Jaden's breathing became shallow. He fiddled with the zipper on his backpack, eyes darting around the room as though searching for something, anything he could sacrifice. "Dad?" he whispered, voice trembling. Maybe I could give him my sketchbook. The one with Mommy's pictures?" Marcus flinched. "Jay, no." Whitford's head tilted. "Your mother's pictures?" Jaden nodded. "I draw her a lot, so I don't forget her face." The room fell completely silent. Even the storm outside seemed to hush itself. Whitford stared at the boy, the weight of grief, his and theirs, floating in the space between them. Something flickered in his expression again, something bleak and deeply human. But he exhaled softly and shook his head. "No," he murmured. "You don't give away memories." He tapped the cane twice as though concluding an internal debate. "Then," Whitford said slowly, "what do you think is fair?" Jaden's chest rose and fell in a fast, uneven rhythm. He looked from the stain to the billionaire to his father, who knelt beside him, squeezing his shoulder with quiet reassurance. Finally, Jaden stood. His small figure trembled, but his chin lifted in a young boy's version of courage. "I think—" His voice wavered, but he kept going. "I should pay for the chair. I made the mess." Whitford's eyebrow lifted. "And how would you do that?" Jaden reached into his pocket with shaking fingers. When he pulled his hand out, it wasn't the sketchbook. It wasn't anything that belonged to his mother. It was a quarter. Just one. A scratched, dull quarter with a dent on the rim. "This is all I have left today," Jaden whispered. "So, I'll start with this, and I can do chores, or clean shoes, or sweep the yard, or anything you want, until I pay it off." Marcus inhaled sharply, and the sound cracked with grief. His son, his sweet, honest son, was offering labor he didn't owe and a coin worth nothing just to fix something he didn't break alone. Whitford stared at the quarter. Then he stared at the boy. Then he closed his eyes. It was the longest silence yet. When he opened them again, they glistened with something that wasn't anger, nor annoyance, but something much older, much deeper, and terribly fragile. "Put it in my hand," Whitford said. Jaden stepped closer and placed the quarter in the billionaire's palm. Whitford closed his fist around it. Something inside him broke. Not loudly, but undeniably. "I've never seen anyone pay so much," he whispered, voice trembling. Jaden blinked. It's only a quarter. Whitford shook his head slowly. No. It's a boy offering everything he has. That's worth more than all the dollars in this house. He opened his hand again, staring at the tiny coin lying in the center like a relic. Then he whispered, more to himself than to them, "And I'm the one who's in debt." Marcus blinked in confusion. "Sir?" Whitford looked up, eyes clearer now than when they first walked in. "Sit down," he said again. "We're not done." And for the first time since Marcus had known him, the billionaire didn't sound like a man of power. He sounded like a man trying to earn forgiveness. Marcus and Jaden exchanged a quick glance, uncertain, cautious, but unable to deny something had shifted in the room. The firelight flickered across Douglas Whitford's face, revealing a weariness that had nothing to do with age. He leaned back in the leather chair, the soaked hoodie still across his knees, and held the quarter in his palm like it was a priceless artifact. "Sit," he said again, softer this time. "Please." Marcus eased back onto the sofa, never taking his eyes off Whitford. Jaden sat upright beside him, small hands clasped tightly on his lap. For a long moment, Whitford didn't speak. He stared at the quarter, then at the toy police car, then at the boy who had offered them so freely. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost confessional. "I wasn't asleep," he said. "Not for a second." Marcus's shoulders tensed. Jaden tilted his head, confused. Whitford nodded slowly. "I was pretending. I left the money out on purpose. I wanted someone, anyone, to take it." He exhaled shakily. "It's something I've done for years." Marcus frowned, unsure where this was going. Whitford tapped the envelope with one finger. "People fail this test every time. Nurses, gardeners, chauffeurs, temporary staff, even supposed friends." He scoffed at himself. "Everyone has a price, at least that's what I thought." He lifted his eyes, locking onto Jaden's, "Until you walked into this room." Jaden blinked. "Me?" Whitford nodded. "You pushed the envelope away from the edge so it wouldn't fall. You covered a stranger because he looked cold. You offered the only things you had to fix a mistake that happened while you were helping." His voice cracked. "I haven't seen honesty like that in 20 years. Marcus felt his breath hitch. He'd spent his whole life trying to raise a good man, even in a world that rarely rewarded kindness. Hearing this here from someone like Whitford felt like something inside him loosening for the first time in years. Whitford rested the cane across his knees. "Let me tell you a truth I've never said out loud." His eyes grew distant. "When you get old and rich, people don't see you anymore. They see opportunity. They see inheritance. They see a vault." His voice grew quieter. "But nobody sees the man. Nobody cares." Marcus shifted slightly. He hadn't expected empathy from someone who lived in a mansion bigger than their entire apartment building. Whitford continued. "My own children only visit when they want something. My business partners pretend friendship until there's a contract. My staff—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Well, you know how that story usually ends." He glanced down at the stain on the chair, not with irritation now, but with something closer to reflection. "The truth is, I was waiting for heartbreak today. I was ready for it." Jaden leaned forward a little. "Did I break your heart?" The question was so small, so sincere, that Whitford's eyes softened instantly. "No," he said softly. "You did the opposite." He lifted the toy police car again, cradling it gently between his fingers. "You gave me a piece of your mother. Something sacred. Something you didn't have to give." His throat tightened. "You reminded me what goodness looks like, and I didn't think I'd ever see that again." Marcus felt tears burn unexpectedly behind his eyes. He blinked rapidly, trying to hide it, until he saw tears in Whitford's eyes too. Real tears, The billionaire cleared his throat, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "So here is what happens now," he said, straightening. "You are not paying for that chair. Not with money, not with chores, not with anything." Jaden relaxed slightly, but Marcus remained tense. Something else was coming. He could feel it. Whitford steepled his fingers. "But I will ask you both for something different." He leaned forward. "Honesty." Marcus frowned again. "Honesty about what?" "About your life," Whitford said. "About why you brought your son here on a stormy day. About why he carries everything he owns in a tiny backpack. About why a child would rather sacrifice his treasures than risk his father losing a job." Jaden looked at Marcus uncertainly. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Sir, I don't talk much about my personal life at work." "I'm not asking as your employer," Whitford said. "I'm asking as a man who wants to understand what kindness costs you." Marcus fell silent. The storm outside softened, as if urging him to speak. After a long moment, Marcus began. His voice was quiet, rough at the edges. "We lost my wife 3 years ago. Jaden's mother was everything to him. Everything to both of us." His throat tightened. "And after she passed, the world got harder. Bills stacked up. People judged quicker. Opportunities disappeared faster." Jaden's hand found his father's. They intertwined fingers. Marcus continued. "I work as many jobs as I can. Kitchens mostly. Some folks treat me fair. Some don't. But this job pays more than the others. If I lose this one..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Whitford listened, really listened. Not with the impatience of a wealthy man indulging a poor man's story, but with the quiet, intense attention of someone who hadn't heard truth spoken to him in a long, long time. When Marcus finished, silence stretched again. Then Whitford leaned back, staring at the ceiling as though wrestling with something heavy inside him. "I've been wrong," he said finally, "about many things." He lowered his gaze to Jaden. "But I wasn't wrong when I said your honesty meant more than money." Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket. The envelope appeared again. He held it out, not toward Marcus, but toward Jaden. "For your coat," he said softly. "For your heart. For your mother, who raised a son with more integrity than 90% of the people I've hired." Jaden's eyes widened. Marcus shook his head immediately. "Sir, no, we can't take that." Whitford frowned. "You aren't taking anything." He pointed to the boy. "He earned it." Marcus hesitated, still overwhelmed. Then something unexpected happened. Whitford smiled. Small, genuine, fragile. "And this," he added, lifting the toy car, "this stays with me, as a reminder of the boy who passed a test I didn't realize was my last one." Jaden blinked. "Last one?" Whitford's expression shifted. Something secret, something weary. "As of today," he murmured, "everything changes." The fire crackled. The storm eased. The weight in the room deepened. Then Whitford leaned forward, eyes bright with a strange, vulnerable determination. "I'm not finished with you," he said again. "In fact, this is only the beginning." Marcus felt his breath catch, a knot tightening in his chest. Good beginnings didn't usually start with billionaires staring at you like they'd discovered some hidden truth. Jaden sat beside him, small legs dangling off the sofa, eyes locked on the old man with a kind of innocent courage that made Marcus both proud and terrified. Whitford pushed himself upright using his cane, the firelight glinting off the silver lion's head as he rose. He walked, slow, deliberate steps, across the rug until he stood just a few feet from the father and son. "Marcus Reed," he said, voice steady but softer now. How long have you been working in my kitchens? Marcus cleared his throat. Almost 5 months, sir. And in those 5 months, Whitford continued, has anyone in this house ever looked you in the eye? Marcus hesitated. Not really, sir. Most people here don't talk to kitchen staff. Whitford nodded tightly, as though the answer confirmed something painful he already knew. You work hard. I've seen the schedules. Double shifts, weekends, night prep work. Yet you stay quiet. You never complain. Marcus shifted, uncomfortable with the spotlight. My boy needs stability. Complaining doesn't pay the bills. A flicker of emotion crossed Whitford's face. Recognition, maybe even regret. He turned to Jaden next. And you, he murmured, bending slightly. You came here today because your father had no choice? Jaden nodded. The school roof leaked. They said we couldn't stay today. So you came to work with him? Whitford lowered himself into a crouch, knees stiff but determined. He looked the boy directly in the eyes. And you still chose to be kind. Jaden frowned shyly. Daddy says kindness is free. The sentence hit Whitford like a physical blow. His eyes softened to the point of breaking, and for a moment, Marcus wondered if the old man might actually collapse under the weight of what he felt. But Whitford inhaled deeply and stood tall again. I want to make you both an offer, he said. Marcus tensed. Offers from rich men rarely helped men like him. Whitford held out the envelope again, not as a test this time, but as a gift. This is yours, all of it, for tonight, for the coat, for the truth. He looked at Marcus, voice steady. It is not charity. It is acknowledgement. Marcus opened his mouth to object, but Whitford lifted a hand. And that's not all. He gestured toward the kitchen door. Your job in the kitchen ends today. Marcus froze. Jaden gasped. Whitford quickly raised his cane again. Not like that. Not fired. Promoted. Marcus blinked. Promoted? To my personal chef, Whitford said plainly, with full salary benefits, and a schedule that doesn't break you in half. The words landed like sunlight breaking through heavy cloud. I don't know what to say, Marcus whispered. You'll have time to decide, Whitford replied. But I'm not done. He paced slowly, circling back toward his chair, picking up the toy police car again. He held it with surprising tenderness. This little car, he said, is a lesson, a reminder that the most valuable things in life come from people who have the least to give. He looked at Jaden again, eyes brightening in a way that made the boy sit a little straighter. So here is my proposal, young man. Whitford leaned on his cane. I'm keeping this car. You gave it to me honestly and freely, but in return, I want to give you something too. Jaden blinked. What is it? Whitford smiled. Small, real, the kind of smile that felt like something blooming in a barren place. A future. Marcus's heart thudded. Whitford continued. Starting today, you are welcome in this house anytime. After school, weekends, holidays. I want you to use the library for homework. I want you to speak with my tutors. I want you to have access to the opportunities children from Crenshaw seldom receive. Marcus inhaled sharply. Sir, that's too much. No, Whitford said firmly. For once in my life, I want to give without expecting something in return. He crouched again, slowly, painfully, until he was eye level with Jaden. And if you'll accept it, I want to sponsor your education. Private school, college, whatever you choose. All expenses paid. Jaden's eyes widened, filling with tears he didn't understand. I don't have to give you anything back? He whispered. Whitford shook his head. You already did. You gave me faith. The boy swallowed hard. So, what do I have to do? Whitford smiled, eyes glistening. Just keep being you. Come by. Talk to me. Read books. Fix things. Teach me how to be kind again. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Jaden looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded, breath trembling. Say yes, son. Jaden turned back to the billionaire, his small hand rising to meet the man's weathered one. Deal, the boy whispered. Their hands met. Whitford's lips quivered as he closed his fingers around the child's hand. Steady, warm, grateful. The fire glowed brighter behind them, as if the mansion itself felt relieved. For the first time in years, a sound escaped the old billionaire. A sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. A laugh. Small. Fragile. But real. And in that moment, Marcus realized something he'd never imagined. His son hadn't just passed a test. He had changed the man giving it. He had changed everything. In the weeks that followed, the Whitford mansion transformed in ways no one, not the staff, not the neighbors, not even Marcus, could have predicted. What began as a single moment in a stormlit library evolved into something warmer, steadier, and astonishingly human. The house that once felt like a mausoleum for old money softened into a place where laughter could breathe again. For the first time in decades, sunlight wasn't filtered through half-closed drapes. Whitford ordered every curtain in the house pulled open each morning. Let the light in, he told the staff, though everyone knew he wasn't talking only about the sun. Jaden became a familiar presence on the property. After school, the mansion car would pick him up at the bus stop near Crenshaw. The driver always greeted him like a VIP, not because of orders, but because the boy had charmed everyone in the house without even trying. He carried his little backpack, and with it, the same careful respect he had shown on his first visit. He never ran across the marble floors. He never touched things without permission, and he never forgot to greet everyone with a smile. Whitford loved that most. On the second week, Jaden entered the library and found the old man waiting with a book already open. You're late, Whitford teased. It was math club, Jaden replied. I'm trying to get faster. Well, Whitford grumbled with a grin, don't get too fast. Old men like me need time to catch up. Jaden laughed, a bright, ringing sound that filled the room like wind chimes on a warm day. Whitford hadn't heard such a sound echo through these halls since his own children were small. The memory cut him, but gently now, like something healing rather than hurting. Marcus watched all of it quietly, at first with caution, then with disbelief, and finally with a swelling gratitude he didn't know how to express. He'd arrive at work to find Whitford and Jaden in the garden, inspecting flowers together. Or in the parlor, where Whitford taught him how to play a simple piano melody from his childhood. Or in the library, surrounded by history books and stories from worlds Jaden had never imagined. The once silent mansion hummed now, with footsteps, with voices, with life. One evening, Marcus finished prepping dinner in the gleaming kitchen and wiped his hands on a clean towel. He stepped into the hallway and paused when he heard laughter. Whitford's laughter, rolling from the library. The sound startled him. He leaned against the doorway to listen. Whitford sat in his usual chair, Kane resting beside him. Jaden perched on a small stool near the table, showing him a sketchbook. The boy had drawn the willowy outline of the mansion, complete with tiny windows and exaggerated chimneys. Why does my house look like it's leaning to the left? Whitford asked, squinting at the page. Because it does, Jaden replied with utter seriousness. The roof kinda slants. It does not, Whitford barked, mostly offended in jest. Jaden shrugged. Maybe you're just sitting crooked. Whitford snorted, actually snorted, and Marcus couldn't stop the smile tugging at his lips. But beneath that smile was something deeper. Watching the two of them felt like witnessing a dream he never allowed himself to have. The dream of a father figure who saw Jaden, valued him, encouraged him. A dream for a better future, a safer world, a path lifted rather than blocked. Still, Marcus kept a respectful distance. He remained the steady hands in the kitchen, the quiet presence who ensured tea was warm, meals were perfect, and the house ran smoothly. He didn't intrude on Whitford and Jaden's time. He didn't want to overstep. But Whitford wouldn't allow the distance to stay. One late afternoon, with the sun slanting orange through the tall windows, Whitford entered the kitchen. Marcus immediately straightened. "Sir, dinner will be—" "Sit," Whitford ordered gently. "Please." Marcus hesitated. Eventually, he set down the chopping knife and sat across from Whitford at the prep table, a simple stainless steel surface that contrasted with the mansion's finery. Whitford rested his cane beside him. His hand drifted instinctively to the small pocket of his sweater where the toy police car now lived, always within reach. "You're doing well here," Whitford said. "Better than well. You run this kitchen like it's your own restaurant." Marcus bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, sir. But I didn't hire you to stay hidden behind ovens and countertops." Marcus blinked, startled. "Sir?" Whitford's eyes softened. "You belong in this house, Marcus, not just working in it." The word struck somewhere deep, somewhere scarred from years of exclusion and dismissal. Marcus swallowed hard. I don't know what you mean." "I mean," Whitford said slowly, "that people like you, people with steady hands and clear hearts, are worth far more than you think." The room blurred slightly as emotion rose unexpectedly in Marcus's chest. "Sir, with respect, I'm just trying to take care of my boy." "And you're doing that," Whitford replied. "But I want to give him more, and I want to give you more." He paused. "If you'll let me." Marcus's breath trembled. "I don't want to take advantage of anything." "You're not taking advantage," Whitford said firmly. "You're accepting an open door." Before Marcus could respond, footsteps echoed in the hall. Jaden burst into the kitchen, holding a book over his head. "Mr. Whitford," he exclaimed, "did you know your library has books older than America?" Whitford chuckled. "Only by a century or two. Can I borrow them?" "No," Whitford said sternly. Jaden's smile faltered, until Whitford added, "Because you don't borrow family things. You just use them." Jaden brightened immediately. Marcus froze. Family. Whitford hadn't said the word lightly. He wasn't a careless man, not even with emotions he barely recognized anymore. The old billionaire looked at Marcus, then at Jaden, then back again. A decision had formed somewhere deep inside him. "It's been a long time," Whitford said softly, "since this house felt like a home." Jaden walked over and hugged his arm. Whitford's eyes glistened. "Thank you," he whispered to the boy. The storm of the first night felt like a distant memory now. In its place was something sturdy, something tender, a bond built not from blood, but from decency, marked by a toy car, a damp hoodie, and the smallest, purest act of kindness. But even as the days grew brighter, even as the mansion filled with warmth, even as Whitford allowed hope to return, a shadow lingered at the edges of his life, a shadow wearing expensive shoes, a shadow with his last name. Whitford felt it coming, approaching, threatening. But he didn't speak of it yet. He only tightened his grip gently on Jaden's shoulder and said, "Let's enjoy the calm while we have it." Because he knew, calm never lasted long, not when greed was listening. It happened on a bright Saturday afternoon, one of those rare California days when the breeze was soft, the sun gentle, and the world felt briefly forgiving. Jaden was in the garden trimming rosemary with a pair of child-safe shears, proud to be helping with dinner, while Marcus prepared lunch inside. Whitford sat nearby on a padded wrought iron chair, cane resting against his leg, watching the boy with a warmth that had become second nature. For a moment, everything felt whole, normal, peaceful. Then the gates opened. The sound, metal grinding, engines humming, cut through the quiet garden like a warning siren. Whitford stiffened. His hand tightened around the top of the cane, the lion's head glinting sharply in the sun. 3 luxury cars rolled into the circular driveway, sleek, glossy, polished to perfection. Black, white, silver. Cars that screamed entitlement more than money. Doors opened in perfect synchronization, like a rehearsed performance. Out stepped his children, all grown, all well-dressed, all wearing the strained smiles of people who had perfected pretending. Whitford exhaled a long, resigned breath. "So," he muttered, "the vultures arrive." Jaden paused mid-trim. "Mr. Whitford? Who are they?" "Family," Whitford said, though the word tasted bitter, or something like it. Jaden frowned. "They don't look happy." "They aren't," Whitford replied. "They're here for what they think belongs to them." The trio walked toward the garden, Cynthia, the eldest, heels clicking sharply on the stone path. Jonathan, tall and smug, sunglasses still on though the sun wasn't bright enough to justify them, and Dylan, the youngest, eyes cold and calculating behind a forced smile. "Dad," Cynthia said, voice clipped, "we've been calling." "You should answer your phone," Jonathan added, gaze already drifting past Whitford toward the mansion, as though measuring its worth. "We were worried," Dylan said, the most convincing liar of the 3. Whitford raised an eyebrow. "Worried? You haven't visited in months." Cynthia clasped her designer purse tighter. "We heard rumors about unexpected guests on the property." Her eyes fell on Jaden. So did Jonathan's. And Dylan's. Jaden shifted uncomfortably under their gaze. Marcus stepped outside just then, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. The moment his eyes met the siblings, he sensed danger. Not physical danger, something colder, sharper. Judgment. "Dad," Jonathan said, gesturing toward Marcus and Jaden. "Can we talk privately?" "No," Whitford answered flatly. Cynthia forced a brittle smile. "This won't take long." "It always takes long," Whitford murmured. Dylan's eyes narrowed at Marcus. "Are you the cook?" Marcus straightened. "Yes, sir. Marcus Reed." Dylan didn't acknowledge the introduction. His gaze slid dismissively over Marcus, then lingered on Jaden with faint annoyance. "You're using the garden," he said to no one in particular, as if the rosemary belonged exclusively to him. Jaden swallowed. "I'm helping." Jonathan stepped closer, towering over the boy. "Helping?" he echoed. "In our family garden?" Whitford's voice turned icy. "My garden." Jonathan ignored him. "What exactly are you teaching this kid, Dad? How to cozy up to rich old men? How to get comfortable in places he doesn't belong?" Marcus moved instinctively, stepping between Jonathan and Jaden. "That's enough." Jonathan scoffed. "Oh, please, spare us the protective father act." Cynthia folded her arms. "Dad, we need clarity. There are whispers. Lawyers call us, your lawyers. They say you've made changes, big ones." Dylan added, "You're not well. We can see that. And people who are unwell can be manipulated." Whitford's jaw tightened. "Manipulated by whom?" All 3 siblings looked directly at Marcus and Jaden. "The help," Jonathan said. Jaden shrank back, eyes wavering with confusion and fear. Marcus's chest tightened with a familiar ache, the ache of being judged before he even spoke. He took a slow breath, steady but pained. "Mr. Whitford," Cynthia pressed, We deserve answers before something catastrophic happens. Whitford tapped his cane against the stone once, hard enough to echo. Catastrophic? He repeated. The only catastrophe is that you show up when you smell inheritance. Cynthia's mouth fell open. Dad! No, Whitford snapped. Not this time. I'm too old to sugarcoat. You three abandoned me years ago, and now you walk into my home and accuse an honest man of manipulation? Dylan scoffed. Honest? You really think people like them don't want a shortcut? Marcus flinched. Jaden blinked, hurt flickering across his small face. Whitford's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Say another word like that, Dylan, and you will leave this property immediately. Dylan lifted his hands in false surrender. We're just saying what everyone else is thinking. Jonathan crossed his arms. Let's not pretend this is about values. Dad, everyone knows you're rewriting your will. We want to know why you're suddenly attached to them. Whitford took a slow breath, then another. Then he turned, not to his children, but to Marcus and Jaden. Come inside, he said quietly. Both of you. Marcus hesitated. Jaden instinctively took his father's hand. You don't have to involve us in this, Marcus murmured. I already have, Whitford replied, and I will continue to. He faced his children one last time, eyes colder than the wind threading through the garden. You want answers? He said. Then wait in the study. I'll give you the truth soon enough. Jonathan smirked. Good, because we're not leaving without it. Whitford didn't respond. He simply guided Marcus and Jaden through the patio doors, the warm light of the mansion swallowing them as the garden fell silent behind them. Once the doors closed, Whitford pressed a hand to his chest, steadying himself. They're afraid, he whispered. They can feel something changing. Marcus looked at him. Sir, what is changing? Whitford exhaled, old sorrow flickering in his eyes. Everything, he said. And they won't like it. He tapped his cane twice on the marble floor. Call my lawyer. Marcus stiffened. Sir? Whitford's voice hardened, calm but resolute. It's time my children learned that love, not blood, determines legacy. Outside, the siblings waited like predators circling a door. Inside, the man they underestimated prepared for a battle they weren't ready for. A battle for truth. A battle for justice. A battle for the boy who had warmed his coldest winter. Night settled over the Whitford mansion like a heavy velvet curtain. The once golden glow of sunset faded into deep blues, casting long shadows across the hallways. Lamps flickered on, one by one, filling the mansion with an eerie stillness, beautiful but tense, as though the house itself sensed the storm brewing inside. Marcus stood beside Jaden outside Whitford's study, both father and son uneasy, both aware that something irreversible was unfolding. From behind the thick mahogany door, muffled voices rose, sharp, entitled, dripping with accusation. Cynthia's voice tight with indignation. Jonathan's low and simmering with impatience. Dylan's polished but poisonous. Jaden clutched Marcus's hand. Daddy, are they mad at us? Marcus knelt down and squeezed his son's shoulders. They're mad at what they don't understand, he said softly. But that's not your fault. Inside the study, Whitford stood before the massive fireplace, leaning on his cane as his lawyers organized documents on the long table. The flames danced behind him, reflecting in his eyes, a mix of exhaustion, defiance, and something that had been missing in him for decades. Conviction. His children paced like restless shadows. Cynthia tapped her heels impatiently. Dad, this is absurd. Calling lawyers? Gathering us at night? For what? Some dramatic family meeting? Jonathan threw his sunglasses onto the desk. Just say whatever you feel you need to say so we can all go home. Dylan folded his arms, leaning against a bookshelf. unless you plan on telling us why you've been spending time with them. Whitford didn't flinch. Sit. All three stiffened at the command. His tone was calm but layered with authority, the kind they hadn't heard since childhood. After a few seconds, they obeyed. Whitford let the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of what was coming. Then he said, "Tonight, you will hear the truth, and you will listen." Cynthia huffed. "Dad, we know you're rewriting your will. You know nothing," Whitford snapped. The room went still. He turned slightly toward the door. "Marcus, Jaden, come in." The door opened slowly, and the father and son stepped inside. Jaden held his backpack close, nerves visible in the way his shoulders drew up. Jonathan scoffed. "Oh, wonderful. The chef and the charity case." Marcus's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Jaden's eyes dropped to the floor. Whitford struck the floor with his cane. One sharp crack. "You will not speak of them that way again." His voice shook, not from weakness, but from rage he'd kept buried far too long. The lawyer, Mr. Stanton, cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitford, shall we begin?" "Yes," Whitford said. "Let's begin." He faced his children directly. "For years," he said, "I have watched you visit only when you wanted something. I have watched you treat this home, this estate, my life, like a waiting room before inheritance." Cynthia stiffened. "Dad, that's unfair." "Is it?" Whitford interrupted. "When's the last time any of you came here without asking for money?" Silence. "Jonathan? Cynthia? Dylan?" He looked at each one slowly. "When did you last ask how I was feeling? What I needed? If I was lonely?" Silence deepened, sinking into the room like cold fog. His children looked away. Jaden, sitting beside Marcus, watched quietly. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from sadness. He understood loneliness more than any child should. Whitford's voice softened. "I didn't know what I was missing until one stormy afternoon. A little boy put his only jacket on me because he thought I was cold." Jonathan rolled his eyes. "This again." Whitford slammed his cane down, harder this time. "You weren't there," he growled. "You didn't see what I saw. A child with nothing offered me everything, while my own children, raised with every privilege, offer nothing when it matters." Cynthia's voice cracked. "Dad, we didn't know. You didn't want to know." The room shifted. Guilt seeped into the cracks between their defensiveness. Whitford nodded to Mr. Stanton. "Read it." The lawyer opened a leather folder, sliding out the official will. He adjusted his glasses and began. "This is the last will and testament of Douglas Whitford, dated 2 days ago." Jonathan muttered under his breath. Cynthia shot him a sharp look. "To my children," the lawyer read, "I leave the trust funds previously established for you. They are substantial, and I believe they meet your expectations." The siblings straightened. Smugness flickered. But then the next words dropped like a stone in water. "As for the rest of my estate, everything I built, everything I earned, everything that remains of the Whitford legacy," Jonathan leaned forward. Cynthia held her breath. Dylan smirked. "I leave it all to Jaden Reed." The room exploded. "What?" Jonathan leapt to his feet. "You're insane!" "This is ridiculous," Cynthia shouted. "A child? A literal child?" Dylan stepped forward, fists clenched. "Dad, you've been manipulated. This is fraud. This is—" Whitford raised a hand, and the room froze. "I have never been clearer in my life," he said. "Jaden has given me more humanity in 1 day than you have in 20 years. Cynthia's lip trembled. "Dad, he's not family." Whitford looked at Jaden, then at Marcus, then back at his children. "He is the closest thing to family I have." Marcus covered his mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. Jaden's eyes filled instantly with tears, confused, stunned, heartbroken, and grateful all at once. Jonathan jabbed a finger at them. "They tricked you." Whitford's voice dropped to a whisper, thick with emotion. "No, they saved me." He nodded to the lawyer again. "Continue." Mr. Stanton cleared his throat. Mr. Whitford also left a personal letter to accompany the will, to be read aloud. "Read it," Whitford commanded. The lawyer unfolded a handwritten page. "To those who question my decision, I measure wealth in hearts, not bank accounts. My children have known only the taking of life. Jaden taught me the giving of it." Jonathan scoffed, but Whitford's stare silenced him. "On a rainy afternoon, I was a man frozen by bitterness. A small boy thawed what was left of my humanity. He protected what wasn't his. He covered me with his coat. He offered me his treasure. He asked for nothing. I owe him everything." Jaden cried silently. Marcus wiped his face, overwhelmed. The lawyer finished. "And that is why the Whitford legacy belongs to the boy who restored the Whitford heart." Silence fell again, deep, stunned, trembling. Whitford rested his hand gently on Jaden's shoulder. The boy leaned into it, instinctively, as though he'd known the old man his whole life. Jonathan finally broke. "We'll sue. We'll drag this through every court in California." Whitford didn't flinch. "The will is ironclad," Dylan sneered. "We'll still fight it." "You always fight," Whitford said, "but you never win where it matters." Cynthia let out a sob, not of grief for her father, but for the empire slipping from her grasp. Whitford closed his eyes, exhaustion settling over him. "Leave," he whispered. "All of you." His children hesitated. "Leave," he repeated. They left, slamming the door behind them. When the echoes died, Whitford turned to Jaden and Marcus, the only two people still sitting with him. He took the toy police car from his pocket, the tiny chipped paint shining under lamplight. "Jaden," he said softly, "there is one more thing." He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a small velvet box. "Your final inheritance," he whispered. Jaden's hands shook as he opened it. Inside, restored, polished, glimmering, was the toy police car. The missing wheel had been replaced, with a wheel made of pure gold. Jaden gasped, tears spilling. Whitford smiled weakly. "A reminder," he said, "that your kindness rebuilt something in me." He brushed Jaden's cheek gently. "And one day, you will rebuild the world." The fire crackled softly. Outside, the storm of greed passed. Inside, the mansion glowed with something far more lasting than wealth. Justice, gratitude, and the kind of love that chooses, not inherits. 3 days after the reading of the will, the Whitford mansion felt impossibly quiet. Not the cold, empty quiet it once held, but a respectful hush, the kind that follows the passing of someone who finally found peace. The curtains remained open the way Whitford liked them, letting morning sunlight spill gently across the floors. The fire in the library still crackled, tended by staff who said they kept it burning, because that's how Whitford preferred it. Marcus stood in the center of the library now, his hat held respectfully in both hands, staring at the leather chair where everything had begun. The stain had long since dried, barely visible now, but he still saw the moment clearly. Jaden's little coat, trembling hands, a billionaire pretending to sleep. It felt like a lifetime ago. Jaden approached quietly, dressed in the navy suit that Whitford had bought him for school presentations. But today it served a different purpose. He carried the small velvet box tucked against his chest. His eyes were red, though he tried to hide it. "Daddy," he whispered, Are we ready?" Marcus placed a hand on his son's back. "Yeah, baby. We're ready. They weren't the only ones in the room, Mr. Stanton, the lawyer, stood by the fireplace with a folder pressed against his chest, waiting. Two housekeepers, women who had worked for Whitford for decades, lingered near the doorway, dabbing their eyes. Even the groundskeeper stood in the hallway, hat pressed over his heart. But the room felt centered on only one person now, Jaden Reed. "Whenever you're ready, son," Mr. Stanton said softly. Jaden stepped forward to the side table beside the leather chair, the same table where the envelope had once sat, the same edge he had pushed it away from with one cautious finger. He opened the velvet box. Inside, the restored toy police car glowed softly, the golden wheel catching the morning sun like a tiny star. Jaden lifted it carefully, holding it the way a child holds something holy. He placed it gently on the table, right beside the spot where Whitford used to rest his hand. "Safe now," Jaden whispered. The words trembled through the room like a prayer. As if on cue, Mr. Stanton cleared his throat and unfolded a letter sealed with dark blue wax. "Mr. Whitford wrote this for you, Jaden. He wanted it read today." Jaden nodded, wiping his cheek. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. The lawyer began. "My dear boy, if you are hearing this, it means I have left this world, hopefully better than I found it, thanks to you. Do not be sad for long. I lived a full life and you gave me the last chapter I didn't know I needed." Marcus blinked hard. "You once placed your coat on my knees because you thought I was cold. At my age, truth is colder than winter, and you warmed something that had frozen in me long ago. That day you gave me your treasure. In return, I give you mine. Not to burden you, but to free you." Jaden sniffed and held the toy car tighter. "Use what I leave you to build, not to hoard. Use it to lift, not to blind. Use it the way you lifted me, from a chair I sat in far too long, convinced the world had no good left." Mr. Stanton paused, voice wavering. "I leave you the Whitford estate because you taught me the only wealth worth having is character. And you, my boy, have it in abundance." Jaden covered his face, shoulders shaking. Marcus pulled him close, tears sliding silently down his own cheeks. The lawyer finished the letter. "And so I ask one thing of you, Jaden. Be the man your father raised. Be the boy who warmed a stranger. Be the heart this world forgets it needs. If you ever wonder whether I believed in you, look to the library. I left my faith in your hands, in the form of a small toy car with a new golden wheel. May it guide you when I no longer can. With love, not blood, but choice. Douglas Whitford." No one spoke for several long seconds. Outside, a breeze rustled through the lemon trees. A bird chirped near the window. Life continued in soft, natural rhythms, as though Whitford himself had orchestrated the moment. Marcus knelt in front of his son. "Jay, you okay?" Jaden nodded, though tears kept streaming. He called me family." Marcus pressed a gentle kiss to the top of his head. You are." Mr. Stanton stepped forward. "There's one last matter. Mr. Whitford left instructions regarding the estate." Marcus rose slowly. "Instructions?" The lawyer smiled, not a legal smile, but a human one. "He wanted the mansion opened every month to children from underserved communities. He wanted scholarships, programs, meals, mentorship. He said the two of you would know how to run it with compassion." Jaden's eyes widened. "Like a big house of helping?" "Exactly," the lawyer said. Marcus's voice cracked. "He trusted us with all that?" "With everything," Stanton replied. The boy looked around the vast library, the shelves stretching to the ceiling, the warm colors, the quiet dignity of the space. And for the first time, he didn't feel out of place. He felt responsible. He walked back to the chair, the leather chair where a sleeping billionaire had once pretended not to see him, and touched its arm gently. "Thank you, Mr. Whitford," he whispered. "I'll make you proud." Marcus watched, chest tight with pride and disbelief. His son, born with little, raised with less, now stood at the doorstep of a future built entirely from kindness. Outside, the clouds parted. A soft beam of sunlight spilled directly into the library, illuminating the golden wheel of the toy car like a blessing. It shimmered brightly across the room, a symbol not of money, but of love earned, legacy rewritten, humanity restored. Jaden took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and looked up at his father. "Daddy, can we help people the way he helped us?" Marcus smiled through tears. "Yeah, baby, we will, starting today." And so the Whitford Reed Foundation was born, not from wealth, but from a jacket placed over cold knees, a toy car given in sacrifice, and a little boy who refused to take what wasn't his. A boy who changed a billionaire. A boy who changed everything. If this story touched you even a little, drop a simple 1 in the comments so I know you're here with us. And if you want more stories like this, stories of kindness, hope, and life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe. Your one comment and one click help us bring the next story to life.